course, I switched through all of the wrong overlays before I went into the right one because I got a new setup. Well, Holy Happy Hour Batman. It is Monday. That makes it Holy Happy Hour Batman here on That Gamer Priest on Twitch. This is a very special episode this week because September is Suicide Prevention Month. And so we have a special and important episode in store in just a few minutes. So welcome to everyone who's joining us. I'm Father Ben. I'm an Episcopal priest, a longtime gamer, TTRPG enthusiast, streamer, podcast host, and I'm the co-founder of the All Ports Open Network. On this show, I'm joined by heroes of the gaming and geek world to talk about life, faith, spirituality, design, game design philosophy, and whatever else comes up. Tonight, to highlight this important month of National Suicide Prevention Month, I will be joined by the authors of Shadows Under Ice, a 4-hour 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons adventure for tiers 1, 2, or 3 characters, which is available now on the Dungeon Masters Guild. All proceeds go to two wonderful organizations, Jasper's Game Day and the American Association of Suicidology, for suicide prevention and awareness efforts. I'll be joined by those authors, Ma'at Crook, Chris Maxwell, and Fenway Jones. And I'm really excited to have them on the show in just a few minutes. I'm going to put the link in the chat, but we're going to be also doing some fundraising of our own tonight. We'll be raising money for those, and all week long. We'll be raising money for those two organizations tonight. And so please consider making a donation. I want to see what we can raise before the show is out tonight. Before we get into the actual episode, I have a few housekeeping notes to go over with you all. So Holy Happy Hour Batman runs from 7:30 p.m. to 9 p.m. Eastern Time right here on That Gamer Priest on Twitch. And then we raid right into another great Apon show, Branching Paths with Kimber and Josh. That's on the channel All Ports Open here on Twitch. But if you stick around right here for the rest of the show, we'll take you right to it after we're done with the show. It's a great show. Josh is a longtime video gamer. He runs a new gamer, Kimber, through classic video games. So it's going to be another great episode of that show tonight, I'm sure. So stick around for that. Also here on Twitch, it is September, and that means you get 50% off of subscriptions. So if you'd like to subscribe to That Gamer Priest or any of our awesome All Ports Open Network channels, you can also gift a subscription. They are currently 50% off. Today is a Monday, and every other week we have a new issue of my Masks Actual Play podcast, Delinquent Comics. So we have a new issue today. It's Vega Rising Issue 3, out now. You can listen to that wherever podcasts are found. You can also listen to Issue 4 2 weeks early if you happen to be an All Ports Open Network Patreon backer. So let's see. There might be some programming changes to our lineup for Holy Happy Hour Batman. For the guests we had advertised just a few minutes ago before the show, there might be some rescheduling, some reshuffling going on. So just keep an eye out. I'll post as soon as I know the details of that. Okay, so it is Holy Happy Hour. If you regularly watch my show, you know that I usually make some sort of drink inspired by my guests. Well, this week I did make a drink. I guess if you can call it that. It's very decadent for a drink. Not exactly inspired by one of my guests, quite, sort of. One of our guests tonight, Fenway Jones, founded Jasper's Game Day after losing her friend Jasper to suicide. I asked Fenway if it would be okay if I could make a drink inspired by Jasper. I asked if Jasper had any favorite drinks for gaming, and Fenway told me that root beer was a go-to and suggested, which I thought was a great suggestion, a root beer float. So I did create a recipe for an amazing root beer float that I call Potion of +2 Saving Throws. I will post the recipe card to social media, if you find us on Twitter, to my Discord channel chat for Holy Happy Hour Batman later if you'd like to check it out. So I'm at Benjamin Wallace on Twitter, and you can find our Discord channel on allportsopen.com if you want to get that, what is truly a decadent root beer float recipe, perfect for gaming with your friends. So hopefully you'll check that out. All right, without further ado, let's bring on our awesome guests. I'm very excited about this week's episode, so I'm going to go ahead and bring them on now. All right, we've got our wonderful guests on the show. I'm going to introduce everyone one at a time. Ma'at, how are you today?
I'm doing pretty dang good.
Thanks for
How are you doing?
I'm great. Thank you for being on the show.
Thank you.
And Fenway, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
How are you today?
I'm doing all right. Had a long day of work, but I'm glad to be here.
Thanks for making the time.
Of course.
And we've got Chris Maxwell also. Chris, how are you?
Howdy, I'm doing great. Like these other two, very busy. Suicide Prevention Month is always a whirlwind, it seems. So, but I am excited to be here, Ben, and I'm just thanks for having us.
Absolutely. So, as I said, so all three of you do a lot of different things in your lives that you're sort of known for, and we can kind of go over some of those different things. But the thing that I know of anyway that brought the three of you together, that brought this show together tonight, was the Shadows Under Ice adventure. And the three of you co-wrote that. It's on the DMs Guild. In just a few minutes to our viewers, I'll link it in the chat. But I was wondering if you all could just kind of give us some background as to how the three of you ended up coming together to work on that and how that project came about.
I think it was Fenway that started it all. Fenway asked if anyone had any ideas about things that Jasper's and the American Association of Suicidology and D&D could just collaborate on. And
Yeah.
so I mentioned writing an adventure together.
Yeah.
Voila.
Yeah. Steps 1, 2, and 3. Yeah. And I knew that Ma'at was a fantastic writer, is a fantastic writer, not was. And
maybe I could be horrible tomorrow if I try really, really hard.
Well,
I definitely could do it.
You've peaked now. This is it.
Yeah.
And Chris and I have been in contact since close to the start of Jasper's, and I know that he is always interested in D&D and plays D&D, so I wanted to collaborate, bring them together to be able to write the adventure. I will say they did most of the work, if not all of it. I just kind of play tested some of it and gave some input.
you gave a lot of input.
And
for
you
sure.
brought us together. It was the
Yeah.
coordination piece too. Yeah.
I was going to say, you was your idea to begin with, so I feel like you deserve as much credit for that, for sure.
I appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, just for some background for folks, Fenway, I already kind of said this, but you started Jasper's Game Day. Do you want to tell people a little bit about just the origins of that and how you got involved in suicide prevention awareness?
Sure. So about 4 years ago, I lost a couple of my friends to suicide within the span of a few months. And I didn't really know, I hadn't had an experience with suicide previous to that. And I didn't really know how to handle it. Throughout a few months, it kind of came to me that I really needed a way to use the feelings that I was experiencing to help other people to be able to get through my own grief. And so that's kind of how Jasper's got started, with the help of my family, my community, my mentor, all of the people around me. I was able to, it was originally going to be a one-time event. I always think that's always interesting. And it kind of blew up from there.
I was gonna say that almost seems like it undersells because it's such a big thing now, and like to go from being like just like an idea to this huge thing that I don't know. I obviously a lot of work must have gone into it, and beyond just the passion that you must have.
Yeah, I mean, now we have a whole board of directors, a board of advisors, a bunch of volunteers, and it's a whole. You know, there was a word I was going for, and I completely lost it.
And your conference speaking, I saw. Is that right?
Yes, I've given 2 talks at 2 different the American Association of Suicidology conferences.
It's amazing.
And don't sell yourself short. She was our 2019 Person of the Year.
Oh, wow.
As well, which the only other awardee was Andrew WK. So
really,
he's on a very, very large platform there. I think what's really interesting too with what you do, Fenway, and why blew up in 2 years because it resonates with people.
Yeah.
People, I mean, we talk about this all the time, but like, you know, gaming and tabletop especially allow you to really express yourself in a way that other sort of games or other sorts of like entertainment just doesn't let you do. And you knew that going in because you had your experience with it, but I don't think anybody else was able to tap into that the way that you did. And I don't know what sort of magic you brought with it, but you did something, and you hit you hit people in the heartstrings, and you came with authenticity and a drive and a passion that just didn't exist before Jasper's. So I mean, it's powerful stuff what she's been able to do.
And there's a lot of people in the community that want to help, and you were just, your passion and your joy and apparently your organizational skills, or
definitely not mine. Definitely not mine.
I can imagine you must have, even in the early days before your board, that you must have had a lot of support that helped you too.
Yeah, my family, especially my dad, he helped with everything since the beginning, and I mean I wouldn't be here. I couldn't be here without his help and the help of the community.
So you connected with Chris. Chris, you're with the American Association of Suicidology. Do you want to tell us a little bit about your background? And I'm curious, like, how gaming got involved sort of in that too?
Yeah, so I have a background actually I have a bachelor's in psychology, and was using that in sort of a clinical field for a couple of years, but then I started volunteering for the crisis line right after I graduated high school. And so I was actually on my local crisis line for about 7 years, and then moved into more administrative work. So I have sort of that background. I'm also an attempt survivor myself, so I have that unfortunate but also, you know, somewhat useful background as well. And so when I came on at AAS, and actually a little bit before, I worked for the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline as well for a few years. And I was lucky enough to be involved in some really cool conversations about video gaming. And so we, you know, a couple of my colleagues and I did a talk at South by Southwest, I think in 2017 or 2016, and so we were kind of focused on video gaming, but you know, we were also like really involved in tabletop gaming and D&D specifically. And so I don't remember what sort of fortuitous event happened, but Fenway and her dad reached out to us, I think by email initially, and said, hey, we have this thing that we're doing, it's really cool, people are picking it up and it is getting bigger. Do you want to get involved? And of course I was like, I threw everything down and I was like, yes, we have to do this. We have to do this immediately. We have to help out in whatever way. So they were working with some local crisis centers, and I think that was like sort of the impetus for us to, you know, we have an entire division at AAS of members who are involved with crisis centers across the country, and actually internationally. We have some in Canada as well. So it made sense to us to see if we could help Fenway and Jasper's Game Day sort of use the money that they're raising to go directly to the people that we knew needed the resources. So we helped them sort of funnel that money out to the crisis centers and find other really, you know, resourceful ways to provide things for folks who are doing this magic stuff. So yeah, I mean, that's sort of the impetus. But of course, you know, again, like Fenway said, I only dabble a little bit here and there. I play, you know, every once in a while. But it was just, it was always one of those things where in any of the games that that my friends and I were playing, mental health seemed to be sort of this like pretty consistent through line, whether it was through madness, you know, quote unquote madness, or something else. There was always this sort of like character through line. And we always felt much more relaxed after we were done with a session, and we felt more close and intimate, and, you know, there was a bond to it. And so, it always just made sense to me, but Fenway put it in a package that worked really well. So it was just like, yes, let's do this.
Yeah, that's awesome. And so I'm curious how did you connect with Ma'at for this project? How did you guys, do you already have that connection, or is that, if you want to jump in, yeah, please.
I blame Fenway.
Yeah, it's totally Fenway. I had not had any communication with Chris until we decided to do the project, and I am so lucky that that he was available and wanted to write an adventure together.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think I'm the lucky one, but well, we can argue about that all day. But Ma'at was just, I mean, you were just like ready to go. You were open. You're open book. I think when we had our first conversation, you said something like, I am open to whatever. Let's put stuff like out there and see what jives, and we'll go from there. And I think that's sort of the process that it took. We knew that it had to have some sort of mental health component. We knew that we wanted something, that people could experience, that they felt like more prepared and more confident after going through the adventure. But Ma'at really took it and to a different level. So
yeah, I was wondering if you all could kind of talk us through the sort of design philosophy for doing there's sort of even kind of taking a step back questions like, why a D&D adventure, like how that connects to mental health, like we can kind of get into that. But I'm curious, like the philosophy of this adventure, like what was the thinking behind it? Like, was it hard to decide, like, okay, this is what we want it to look like? It seems pretty groundbreaking to me. I don't know of any other adventures that try to do this kind of work. So very curious about it.
Well, we didn't have to start from scratch. Because we were also collaborating with D&D Adventures League, we already had a template for what the layout of the adventure. So we didn't have to figure out fonts or anything like that. But the reason we thought that D&D would be a good place for this is pretty much the reasons that Chris already touched on. Not just it's not just that mental health and analogs, things that look are inspired by mental health or similar to. They are in all of our games and so many stories and media already. So we didn't have to like invent the wheel or anything there. I too find that when I'm playing an adventure or writing adventure, like social skills end up in the game. It's about a group of adventurers who get together. There's gonna be some social stuff in there. A lot of what adventurers do is try to help people. So that's easy. That's an easy way to fit this in. We just wanted there to be tools that DMs could use so that they would feel more comfortable talking about these topics, and give players information that they can use too. Already there's so much misinformation out there about things like suicide and mental health, and there are people who abuse, who are abusive. So it's kind of nice to have something out there that talks about, hey, here's some information, so that you can be more conscious of how you portray this stuff. And I think there were some things too that we wanted to make sure that the characters didn't depend on disrespectful stereotypes. We wanted them to be well thought out, fleshed out. We didn't want them to be objects. We wanted the characters that the players meet to be as close to real people as a tiefling, an orc, and an elf could be.
I was gonna say that sounds challenging, especially because like it's a 4-hour adventure, so
Right.
it's hard both to create sort of NPCs for a D&D adventure that are, you know, more than that, you know, let alone to portray them in such a way in a 4-hour adventure.
I think it's about the writing. As a writer, you could just have someone be something that just kind of pushes the characters forward, or you could have NPC that interacts with the characters and asks for the help and is specific about the kind of help that they want. I don't think it is actually that challenging, and it doesn't take any more words. It's just how you say something. Like you could be, you could write a very passive character, or you can write someone that has a conversation with the players.
So we got a question in the chat. I want to address it so we can clarify, which is this is a video game about suicide. So this is it is a Dungeons and Dragons module for running a adventurers. I guess it could be used in Adventurers League, or it could be used just in any D&D session, right? It's for tabletop role playing game, Dungeons and Dragons module. To hope that answers the question. Mystic Blue, thank you for the question in the chat. And if anyone has any questions while we're chatting, please do drop them in the chat, and we'll try to address them. Yeah.
One of the things too I wanted to add to, and I'm avoiding all spoilers, but
Sure.
I know one of the things that we really wanted to sort of address, and you hit on this a little bit, in that like in popular culture and popular media, we see sort of suicide and mental health portrayed in a really pathological way. And that, like, you know, there's, you know, any number of really sort of not great representations, especially in science fiction or fantasy. Horror has a lot of really bad depictions of mental health and suicide. So we wanted to avoid all of that, all those big sort of stereotypes. But we also wanted to make this sort of useful. We didn't want to present situations where there was like either a success or failure. It was just like varying sort of like on a spectrum of different things that could happen that still sort of made you feel like you weren't necessarily responsible for someone getting hurt, right? You did a really good job, I think, of like protecting the players, I think, in that sense, with your writing and your ability to say like, well, we can't have everybody win 100% of the time, but we also need to make sure that their mental health is taken care of as well. We didn't want to present a situation where they would feel bad or upset or something like that.
Yeah, and the play testing taught us some of that too. But yeah, because this is a topic that people aren't used to talking openly about or having knowledgeable conversations about it, there was the risk that you could say something that might have hurt someone's feelings, just because this is a social game. And I know for myself, the very first time I ran it, there were some ways that I talked to the players that I wish that I could have taken back.
Oh, really?
For example, one of the things that we can do to help people in real life is not to throw suggestions at them on how to fix whatever problem is going on. And so when we play D&D, that is something that as adventurers we do often. It's a natural thing for us to come across a problem and then just start throwing out possible solutions. But since that's not so helpful in real life, and in these characters' backstories, they've already, I mean, they've lived these lives. They've already put a lot of thought into, okay, what can I do to feel better about this, whatever's going on. So one of the things that rather than just saying, rather than saying to the player, the throwing out suggestions is not helpful, even though that's true, it can not feel that great as a player. And I know as soon as I said it, I wished I could take it back. So then in playtesting, we thought of some things that the NPCs could do and what people might say in real life. And yeah, sure, in real life, someone might have had an even more emotional reaction than I did to hearing a bunch of suggestions, advice that they weren't ready for or wanting to hear. But there are suggestions in the module for the DMs on role playing, on how the NPCs might say something like, "Oh, I wasn't ready to hear a bunch of suggestions, but I have put a lot of thought into this, and here's some of the things that have helped me." Or here's some of the things that I think might help me. Can you help me with that?
Yeah, just that gentle push.
Yeah.
And I think we got sneaky too a little bit, if I may. Yeah, I think we may have given some folks some very easy to remember, but also very important crisis tactics, and saying things like, someone who has experienced what you're going through might feel like they want to kill themselves, or they might be thinking about suicide. Is that something that you're going through right now? Or is that something you're thinking about? And we kind of lay some of these, like, some pointers and things throughout, both for the DM and for users. And that's something that, is a perfect way to, not perfect, I'm not going to say the way that I say is perfect, but it's a great way to approach the topic in real life with someone that you're concerned about. You're not assuming what they're going through. You're not, this is even in the case of the characters. You don't know everything that they've tried in their past to try to take care of their issue. And so if you come in and you start saying, well, you got to do this, and you got to do that, and you got to do this. But if you come in and you say, someone that has experienced this, they might be also experiencing this. How does it hurt? Where can I help? I think we threw some of that stuff in there too, right? So some of these things that people might leave this adventure feeling a little bit more confident and having real life crisis conversations with folks.
And that is in some of the MCC dialogue that may be helpful for the DMs on how to role play some of this. But then also it's explicit in a handout as well, for tips on how to help the NPCs or people that you know in real life that are going through any type of crisis, which can include thoughts of suicide.
Yeah. I was curious, you kind of talked about this a little bit, and I was curious beforehand. Someone asked if it's been released. It has been released, and I did link it in the chat, and I will just link it again while we're talking. But I was going to ask about safety tools and whether there were sort of safety tools built in, and like what kind of safety If I see Fenway very much nodding, what kind of sort of safety is built into the adventure experience?
You want to talk about it, Fenway?
Sure, I can do that. I know that at least in the roll 20 assets of the adventure, there's this explicit like a X card at the bottom of the screen on the roll 20 that somebody can use. I'm not sure how familiar you are with the X card rule, but for those of you watching, the X card is somebody can hold it up, use it, message the DM any way that they feel comfortable with, an X or some sort of whatever predetermined signal that the group has. If they are uncomfortable with the situation and do not feel like they can continue in the the encounter that they are in. I know that another system that is often used is the NO and X system, which is a continuation of the X card system, which O is okay and N is basically like the yellow, like I'm getting a little uncomfortable. Can we steer away from this? But I'm not too red yet.
And that's another one too. Red, green, and yellow cards used to.
I believe the description of that is in the adventure as well. Am I correct?
There is a link to Kiana Shaw and Lauren Bryant Monk's TTRPG Safety Toolkit. They collected community safety tools that can be found all over the internet. But if you go to that one toolkit, you can find a list of tons of different safety tools. And it's cool to have them because what works for one adventure may not work for another. What works for one group of players may not work for another, or the situation. There's that link in there as well. We have one of the first pages in the adventure also gives tips on communicating with your players, doing a pre-game chat, doing a post-game chat. We give tips on language to avoid, common words that can come up around conversations of mental health that aren't so helpful, that may be harmful even, and just words to be aware of. And so many of them are commonly in our everyday language. So it's good to have the use of those safety tools, because sometimes we say things that we're not even aware are harmful, and we're not going to be aware of them until we start practicing and being in a safe place where it's okay, where maybe the table has made an agreement. If I say the word, whatever word it is that we're trying not to use, can you just put up a finger or use one of the cards, raise your hand in the chat or whatever, just to make me aware of it so that I can practice not using it anymore. And that may not be safe feel safe at the table. That may feel too vulnerable. So maybe the person will ask for a private chat conversation for touching on stuff like that.
We talked about that a lot. That very first session that we had, and things like crazy, insane. People say, "Oh, my OCD is kicking in," right? So just general awareness of what other people might be experiencing in terms of mental health concerns or whatever it is, right? But even when you go into suicide stuff, like avoiding commit suicide and refer to, that someone has died by suicide, or have you thought about suicide rather than have you thought about committing suicide, right? So just certain language changes. But we had a really long and good conversation that first time about just stuff that I don't think either of us had thought about. We were like, oh yeah, we got to add that.
I know, so two things. One, I know, to add on to that list, Chris, I know that one of the other things that's in there, I believe, is the term successful, or failure. Not in the terms of a adventure, but in the terms of a suicide, or an attempt. And to use those words, it often makes it seem like to die by suicide was a good goal, and it's not. And so, we want to stay away from those terms to keep it as safe as possible. And then the second thing was, I know one of the, I don't know if you would call it a safety tool necessarily, but one of the things that they created was a new, it's called Chardon reaction chart. And Chardon is a crystal, I think, in the season 10 of the Adventurers League, and it creates effects to people that often mess with their minds. And a lot of the times, a lot of the season 10 adventures use the term madness, and it is not a mental health friendly term. And so Ma'at and Chris created a Chardon stress reaction chart that I thought was very cool, and they're all mental health friendly in the chart, and educational.
One of the things that we noticed was that the in the Dungeon Master's Guide, the madness tables, they were more like stress responses. The fight
or flight
freeze. That's so hard to say. Those kind of responses are just like it seems like probably the majority of the effects in those tables relate to that.
Isn't one of them actually just freezing? Like
yeah.
Yes.
I mean,
yeah. And there were some things like there are hallucinations in there. Some having delusions that someone is out to get you. And those are totally explainable without just making them weird or wrong, and exploiting that just to make things scary or awkward or weird.
Entertainment value,
yeah. And we realized that if it was just worded differently, then it was more respectful way to say it, and normalized the fact that there are some times when our minds are affected to where we might hallucinate. I know when I was a kid, one time I didn't have the nicest parents, but I went to bed without food. I woke up the next morning and I followed Sunday all the way to the kitchen, where I then had my breakfast. So I saw a visual hallucination, and that's totally normal. That doesn't have to be something weird or strange. And if we describe it in a way that there's ways that we can describe it that can make it more respectful. I tried to think of a different word other than respectful, because I already said it a bunch of times, but I couldn't think of it.
That was a goal, and to normalize the reactions and the experiences of people, like all people. I mean, one of the things that we hear a lot in suicide prevention is that someone is, that suicide is a result of irrational thinking. And that's always bugged me, because it's not irrational to the person who's experiencing it. It might seem like the most rational thing that they've ever thought of, but the behavior itself is aberrant, right? And so that's the shift. And so when we were talking about these sorts of reactions, that's what it was always like, okay, well, but this is just a legitimate experience that someone might be having if they were to experience this thing in their environment. It's a stimulus and a response. But yeah, like normalizing those kinds of things and changing some of the terminology. I think that was sort of one of the more fun aspects of what we were doing with the chart, is, you know, not using something like madness, but using different terminology and things. So,
so for the hallucination, oh geez, I have it right here. Maybe I should just pull it up. So a DM could say, the events affect your character's sensory input, causing them to hallucinate, hear, see, feel, smell, and or taste. They have disadvantage on ability checks, because all they can see is the hallucination, or all they can hear is the hallucination. So it's exactly the same as in the DM's guide, but it's just written in a way that's more understanding.
And I think one of the points to that was kind of like Chris touched on, to make it known that everyone has stress responses. Like, it's not an abnormal thing. Quite literally, I'm taking abnormal psychology right now. Like, stress is not categorized as abnormal in a psychology world. So, like,
well, and that's what, yeah, we're just, but to throw this out there, you're still in high school and you're taking college courses anyway. But no, there's that pathological piece. So psychology, psychiatry, for the longest period of time, have followed this medical model that something is wrong with the person and has to be fixed. Otherwise, that person will continue to experience symptomology that is unwanted, right? But I mean, if you think about, and this could be totally philosophical conversation if we wanted it to be, but if you think about going back hundreds of years and native or Aboriginal cultures, hallucinations were seen as like a really positive thing, you know, that this was a view to a different reality or a different experience that only certain people that were experiencing these things could see. So it's not always been viewed as pathological, but in this medical model, that's sort of what we've been force fed for the longest period of time. When in reality, we're all just experiencing environment and stimulus in different and individual ways, because we're all different and individual, right? Go figure.
Yeah.
Huge shocker. So
and
yeah,
we're living in this world. It's impossible to experience this world without experiencing this world and all the things that it can do to our brains.
Yeah, so all the stuff about language and you know, like needing to think that through made me think about how I really wish that. So I'm an Episcopal priest, and I just feel like in my seminary training, you know, we were trained to do some amount of pastoral care, being one of our primary roles. I feel like we were just not equipped in my seminary experience for these kinds of things. For like, it just was not really a part of our training. That led me to an additional thought, which is, oh, I should run this for some priests. I should run this.
Yeah, see what happens. See what the variety of responses you get. I would be really interested to hear that.
Yeah.
But you know what, Ben? Like, you aren't alone. You know who else isn't very well trained in suicide prevention? Therapists, clinicians. It's not a mandate for folks in their master's or their PhD.
Really?
No, it is not required.
Also, a lot of school counselors are not trained in that. Some are, but not a lot.
For sure, the general public, we don't talk about this stuff in a helpful way.
No.
Well, I mean, I was thinking, like, you know, if those two things just shocked me. But I was thinking if people in my field, which are trained to do pastoral care, if there's enough, if there's a barrier, and we're not really trained well in that language, then certainly people who are in the general public who maybe aren't in a helping profession. But the idea that it's that other information shocked me, because I would have assumed that at least in those fields, maybe not even, I would think even school guidance counselors, I would think that would be pretty essential, pretty mandatory training.
Yeah, a majority of the time they get training on things like ethics and liability when it comes to, mandatory reporting or things like that, but not specific suicide or acute suicidality care. Not things like crisis elements. That's why if you've ever called a therapist, on their voicemail, it always says, if you find yourself in danger, call 911. Right? This is what they're taught to do, but they're not typically. I think maybe a couple states now have a mandate. I think California might be one of them. I think Oregon or another Pacific Northwest area. Like I think a couple of states might have mandates for clinicians in their higher education, but it's not required all over, which is just baffling. I mean, we need more training for folks, not just clinicians, but for priests, pastors, rabbis, everybody, right? Especially if you're having that kind of close contact with folks.
I'm sorry, my Alexa device started making a phone. Someone's calling me on my, that's a first for the show. I'm getting a phone call in the room on my Alexa device, so I muted my microphone. Well, I'm curious, given, hold on. Oh, Echo, stop.
This is what it's like when the machines attack.
It's actually, I know who it is that's calling me, and I feel bad, but it's complicated. First time for everything. I was just thinking about, the fact that that's true about the general public. I'm curious what are people's experiences, I guess, both in playtesting and since the adventure's been out, what kinds of experiences have you been hearing from people? What kind of reactions have you heard?
Fenway, you did a ton of work. You brought it to a conference, right? Or not a conference, but a convention.
Yes, I actually brought it to 2 different conventions.
There you go.
I believe the first one we play tested it at Gen Con last year, and then we also play tested it at Gary Con, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, I think so. I think that's what happened. I know for sure we play tested at Gary Con. I am not 100% positive at Gen Con, but I had a lot of experiences. People seemed to really, be interested in the concept. I think a lot of them were surprised. So the very first time that I did it, I didn't explicitly say in the description of the game that it was a role play adventure. That I did say that it was a suicide prevention, mental health based adventure, because I knew that was a very important piece. I did not say that it was a role play only adventure, which I think some people were at first when they were not informed, weren't ecstatic about, because it wasn't the people were looking for that combat aspect, which is totally okay. But once I put it in there that it was a role play only adventure, I started to get the people who really wanted that role play piece. And there were some people who I had to have specific conversations with, because they had expressed to me some of their concerns, and with the adventure, not necessarily with how it was written, but just them playing it personally. And so, I would check on them every 20 minutes, just be like, hey, everything okay? I just want to make sure that we're connecting, making sure that everything is staying safe and comfortable for you. And most of them said yes the whole time. And there was one time that I had to steer away from one of the conversations because they were feeling I don't know if unsafe is the right terminology, but just uncomfortable in the situation. And so, it was just a very interesting thing to see all the different people's reactions to mental health being brought up in a non-mental health, like a not typical mental health space, like at conventions, there's AFK rooms sometimes, but mental health is not usually the subject of conversation.
And when people have things like madness in their game, that's a norm in D&D. And so you usually don't have a content warning, and maybe someone would leave the table without even realizing that without even thinking that, that there are that is a mental health analog. No, wait, my brain spaced. But I have had, I'm also D&D Adventures, one of the D&D Adventures League admin. So I do hear stories from people behind the scenes about how they were uncomfortable with that. They were uncomfortable with portrayals. And the reason they don't say at the table is because they don't feel like it's safe to say at the table. So we don't hear as often publicly that someone is not comfortable, does not feel safe at the table. It's behind the scenes that someone like in my position would hear that.
Did you say with portrayals? Is that what you said?
With portrayals too.
Okay.
Like someone might feel uncomfortable about mental health stereotype, like the comedy relief crackpot, quote unquote. They might feel uncomfortable with that, but not say anything there at the table. They're only going to speak to someone that they feel safe with, and if they feel like that's someone that can do something about it too, it would be another reason that someone would come forward and say something. But yeah, when I was a DM for the adventures, even from playtesting and then even afterwards, we try when we have signups for the game to include information like content warnings, and to include that it is a role play heavy with opportunities for light combat in there as well. So one of the things that you can do as a safety tool is to have those pre-game conversations with someone. And like Fenway was saying, I would have people say their concerns about things that they were worried, portrayals they were worried about, language they were worried about, having stuff in there for shock value, not really for I don't know. This is adventures like this are a good opportunity to explore and work through and process real life things like mental health. So they talked about some of the things that they were uncomfortable with, and that's my opportunity. That's been my opportunity to tell them, okay, from what you described, here's a situation that's similar. Here's someone you're going to meet that you could meet that's similar, and here's how that plays out. Does that feel comfortable with you? I try not to give too many spoilers. I don't give any unnecessary spoilers, but I'm trying to get as much information as I can, because I care about the people at the table. We're playing a game. I want you to have fun.
Yeah.
So yeah, I did get some of those pre-game responses, and then those same people were the ones afterwards that if they're during the playtesting, if there was any concerns that they had, then they let us know and those changes were made. But the majority of the time it was, I really loved how this was handled, and I really enjoyed this part of the game. My son, who's 7 years old, I am so glad that he got to play this, because he has friends that have, I believe one person did share that that they had loved ones or friends who had also died from suicide. Or had that experience somewhere in their life. And they were, I didn't get anyone that said that they wished this game did not exist.
Yeah, I didn't either, for the record.
Yeah.
And I know that a lot of people said that they were thankful, to me anyway, for the portrayal. That that it is something that other people go through, and it should be talked about more. It should be destigmatized, and that whoever's going through it, the thoughts of suicide, depression, stress, anxiety, any of the mental health issues, they're not the only one going through it. And I think that this adventure gave a good, intro to that world where they can know that they're not alone, and that they can talk about it, and there are resources for them and places that they can go.
And that their friends and family don't need to feel helpless and awkward about having these conversations.
But I think I don't think I've told either of you this yet, but one of my contacts after playing it went back. They work at a community mental health center, and they had sort of seen this as a reason to put together some group therapy based on not just this adventure, but D&D and tabletop by itself. And so that sort of reaction, I think, is one of the ultimate sort of things that we could see from this real life change, real life effective change at a local or community level, where people are using this in a way to help folks either cope or react to different things, or, like Ma'at said, process stuff. So I thought that was really cool, and seeing that sort of a reaction is pretty special, I think. But it just goes to show how, the work that went into this was full of compassion and care, and we really wanted people to feel safe when they went through the adventure and experienced these things.
Yeah, I was thinking about how that broader piece you're just talking about, like that next step sort of the influence something like this can have, because I was thinking about how, usually who is it that you are gaming with? Depending on where you're gaming, it's going to be friend groups of your friends, or maybe like if you go and game at like a local game shop or something, and you do D&D Adventure League type gaming, or at like a con. But either way, it's like within communities of, well, hopefully care and support, right? So whether that's your friend groups, which you hope are communities of care and support, they're not, unfortunately, they're sometimes not, depending on the group of people that you play with. But yeah, I was just thinking about that broader piece, and I'm just curious what you all think about, how you all feel about the idea that, like, how gaming can be that kind of supportive or care community for people.
I mean, I'm under the belief that the gaming community is a very large family. Obviously, there's those people who don't necessarily like to be associated with the family, or are not the nicest people a part of the family. Those are always going to be in any group of people. But for the most part, I think we are very accepting, very loving, very caring community. And I think that it has really benefited both Jasper's and the adventure in general, to have that community that wants to help, wants to be a part of the conversation, hasn't known how to previously. But once they have that outlet, once they know how to, is very eager to be a part of it.
It's such a big community, and there are a lot of people who want to make it very welcoming, safe, inclusive. There's a lot of people that do care and who want to make a difference for people, want people to have fun.
Ben, you sort of alluded to this, and I think this is sort of what we're talking about too, and that like the friend groups that we sometimes play with are the same folks that we would come to first if we had mental health concerns, or if we thought we might, need to talk to somebody about suicide. So, what we're thinking about. So these are the groups of people that we want to be around when we're looking at things like this and when we're experiencing this stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, if I could just be personal for a moment, and part of my desire for doing this episode is that I lost a very dear friend to suicide 5 years ago, and he was basically like a brother to me, someone I lived with in college, very, very dear friend of mine. And Artie, his name is Artie, and it was very shocking, of course, but it was also shocking because we were, I thought, close, and I didn't see it coming. This is somebody that I did do, not as recently not that recently, but we had for years played tabletop role playing games together, played D&D together, and other games together, and it was such a shock to me that he didn't talk to me. That was one of my big things, is I really felt like, why did we not talk about, this? Why was it such a surprise? And that sort of always haunted me. And so, yeah, it's just like one of those things that I think about sometimes about, well, how could I don't know. I don't know what it was why it is that he didn't talk to me. And I'll never know. But all of the possible reasons have gone through my mind at different times. And of course, the thing that keeps me up at night is the idea that I wasn't as open to him as, for him to be able to feel like he could come to me. And so, that's just, I think, one of the things with this that I thought a lot about afterward is like making myself the kind of person that can be approached by a good friend, someone I would game with. Because a lot of my experience of gaming groups, it's a group of very crass people. My personal experience with gaming groups, where there's a lot of joking around, even some like razzing each other, that kind of stuff. And so I just have thought a lot about like, how open am I? How open was our group to being, supportive of somebody who might have been in need? And I don't know. There could have been a million of other reasons why we didn't talk about it, why he didn't talk to me. But anyway, that's sort of to make it personal. That's like, what goes through my mind about this.
I think we've all been pretty personal here tonight.
Yeah. I mean, for me, as I hadn't shared, that with, I don't think any of you in the background of doing this episode. And I wasn't 100% sure if I was going to either, but yeah.
Well, and Ben too, I mean, with, in Artie's case, in a lot of people's cases, in my case, when you're in the position that you're experiencing these thoughts of suicide, and sometimes it's really fast, sometimes it's 5 minutes, sometimes it's an hour, but rarely longer than that. I mean, the real intense stuff is right then. And when you're thinking about what, taking your own life in that short of time span, you're thinking about not being a burden on those that are closest to you. That's one of the hugest things. And so it wasn't that you did anything wrong. And I think for a lot of us who have lost folks, that's a super common sort of reaction. It's like, what could I have done? What should I have done? What did I do wrong?
That's a big part of grief, period.
What didn't I say right? Yeah, I didn't get to have a proper goodbye, those kinds of things. And in that, in that moment, it's impossible to say what he was really thinking. And there were probably a million different things. But one of the very common things is that folks in that position don't want to appear to be a burden to those that they care about the most. And and it's so that concept that folks are selfish, right, when they're thinking about suicide or they're attempting suicide, is farthest from the truth, right? That they are first and foremost putting those who are closest to them again, and what they see as rational, in their mind in that moment, that's what they're experiencing, and they want to protect those around them. And it's, again, we don't know, but it's just a thought.
Thank you for sharing it with us too.
Yeah, you're welcome. Yeah, well, so I've been thinking a lot about mental health in general too lately, because I've been playing. So have you, any of you played or seen the game Psychonauts 2? It didn't come out too long ago. The video. Are you aware of this game?
I'm aware of it. I don't have what is it on a PS4? I don't have a PS4.
Okay, I'm playing on my PC through Xbox Game Pass. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. But so it's really a game about mental health and healing, and it's really good. So that's kind of why it's in my head. But I've been thinking in between doing this today and then spending a couple hours earlier today playing that game. I've just been thinking about like games dealing with mental health and destigmatization, and just like curious if you all think that this is like maybe we'll see more of this, or are there other things out there maybe I don't even know. But I just don't know if we're in a moment for seeing these games sort of take on mental health destigmatization or not.
I hope so.
Yeah. I know that Psychonauts 2, I believe they worked with takethis.org.
Dr. B
as a consultant.
Yes.
Yeah, Dr. B is an awesome individual. I think do we all know him? Yeah, he's great. But he's consulting a lot of.
If you don't know Dr. B and takethis.org, there you go.
Yeah, can you tell us? You can tell us about that, and I'll link it if I can pull it up.
Okay.
Yeah, take this.
I'll do a link too.
Okay. Yeah, perfect. Takethis.org is another organization that works with gaming and specifically mental health. So where Jasper's does specifically suicide prevention, Take This does specifically mental health awareness. And just kind of like the destigmatization of talking about it. And so we work in very similar capacities. And Dr. B is an amazing human being, and is actually one of my good friends. We talk pretty regularly. And Take This does a lot of the, if you're familiar with the AFK rooms at conventions, they're the ones who typically do that.
Yeah, now that I'm seeing the logo, I recognized it from like PAX Unplugged and other cons to the AFK room. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so a lot of people aren't familiar with the actual organization, but are familiar with the AFK rooms, which is kind of how that's how Dr. B got involved with Take This, and how a lot of people get involved with Take This is the AFK rooms.
They have a lot of like I've done a few of their workshops, streaming workshops. So one of the things that you can do to help make your table safer and also just level up as a human being is to do research and learn. So that they're a good resource for that too.
Absolutely. And I know that without saying too much, Jasper's is hoping to do something very soon with Take This in those lines of aspects. But something I can speak about is the fact that Jasper's is coming out with soon. We have given it to our ambassadors. We're currently in the process of getting it ready for general public, a toolkit, a mental health toolkit for streamers,
cool.
in which it talks about how streamers can implement mental health safety tools in their chats and in how they're talking in their streams. And if someone comes to them with a mental health concern, or, because the reason we created this is because a lot of our ambassadors were getting approached by people who knew that they were part of Jasper, so just kind of assumed that they were ready to talk about mental health concerns, which oftentimes they're not trained, they're not comfortable with that, they're not ready for it. And so it's not a safe environment for the person coming to them or for them in general, because, you know, they weren't expecting it, they weren't ready, not trained, all that sort of stuff. And so we wanted to make sure that they had the resources in which to respond to the situation as minimally as possible to get them to the right professionals that are able to help them in the correct manner.
Yeah, Fenway, can you tell us about being an ambassador for Jasper's?
Sure. Right now, the applications are currently open for being an ambassador at Jasper's Game Day. They closed the 15th though, so it's very close.
2 days if you're watching this live.
Yes, 2 days if you're watching it live.
I'm probably sorry.
So for as an ambassador for Jasper's Game Day, Jasper's Game Day, we don't do the actual streaming aspect of things. We usually create an event and then find a host for it. And an ambassador, they're someone who streams regularly or is part of the podcast community or is some sort of, you know, online community that they are a public figure of. And it doesn't have to be any specific following or, you know, doesn't have to be only through Twitch or anything like that. It's just someone who is passionate about mental health, suicide prevention, and, you know, being in the public eye and helping with our mission. And so, you know, those are the specifics of it. And there's a few requirements for the ambassador program. I won't get into the nitty-gritty details, but and then there's some rewards if you reach money-raising goals during the year of it. So it's a 1-year program, but if you get into it, you don't have to reapply, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's really great. Thank you for sharing that. And by the way, I do want to also just comment again that we are raising money right now too. We mentioned at the beginning of the stream in case someone jumped in later. And you can see the link right there in the chat. And if you were to click on it, you'd see that we raised $105 so far. So we appreciate people's generosity, and I hope you'll continue to give here. And then we'll be trying to raise money over the next week. I think it's set up for 10 days, so we'll try to raise money for the full 10 days. See how much you can raise. But yes, when you started saying that, Fenway, about like a toolkit for streamers, I know you said it was for the ambassadors. Immediately, I thought, oh, that's a great idea for anyone who streams, because that's probably very, very useful for whether someone's like an ambassador with Jasper's or just a streamer. I mean, I stream, but my stream base is small, and there are people who have huge stream bases of audience and are just constantly in contact with their audience and their community they've built. And I can only imagine that they experience a lot of the kind of stuff you were talking about, even if they're not known for being an ambassador.
Yeah, I agree. That's one of the reasons. Originally, it was built for the ambassadors, but right now we're kind of in the like second stage process of getting it ready for like a generalized public release. We're hoping to put it on our website as a downloadable resource. We're not going to be charging for it because we want it to be available to as many people as possible. Any stream base, small or big, or anywhere in between. Like that's our goal for that.
That's awesome.
Thank you. And I know that one of the reasons that a lot of people are interested in it, especially the bigger streamers, is sometimes people can feel like they are familiar with the public figure in the way that they're friends with them. They're able to share things they wouldn't share normally with a stranger, and with the thought pattern that they know them because they watch them. And usually, not always, obviously you watch your friends, those sorts of things, but usually that's not the case.
Mm-hmm.
And so for the streamers to have a resource in which to be able to handle the situation safely for themselves and for the person that they're interacting with is important to us, is important to our members who built it. It's actually one of our board members and one of our board of directors members and one of our board of advisor members. They built it together. Our mental health advisor, and then our board of director member. Her name's Lisa. She is technically the director of finance, but we like to call her either the director of party funds or or the director of jack of all trades, because she's involved in so many things, so many different projects, and she's just amazing. So
That's great. And just a reminder too, if folks have questions for the last few minutes here, please feel free to drop them in the chat, and we'll try to field them as we're talking here. Chris, I had a question for you, which was, I'm assuming this is the first D&D question. Sorry, I was reading the chat. My brain did a thing there. This is the first D&D adventure you've ever written, so I'm curious what that was like in general.
I mean, Ma'at did all of the framework and the writing for it.
Okay.
And so like that was the hard part.
I thought maybe you got to take a stab at doing some D&D adventure writing.
But we did like kind of go back and forth with some things, and we tried to maneuver certain ideas, and after reading it, we realized that like there were a couple of pieces that needed to be shifted or whatever, and so. But I thought the process was fascinating. I mean, and also like I was on the edge of my seat for a week or two at a time while Ma'at was doing the writing or the artwork, and then I would see it come through on the email, and I'd be like, "All right, let's see what we got." And I started going through it. But no, I mean, it was fascinating, and to be able to. Again, focus on suicide prevention, mental health, in such an official capacity with such an amazing team on something like this was super awesome. I would love to do it again, and I'm always ready and rearing to go. So
I was going to ask if this is the first of many to come.
I hope so.
Sorry,
ruining my plans.
No, this is it.
I have to talk them into it before.
I'm never doing one again.
You don't need to do much talking. Totally into doing it again. The process was our first we talked by email, and then we got together on a Zoom call, and that was our brainstorming session where we just were all, what about this idea, and what if there's a crystal, and it's I don't want to give any spoilers,
and we connected on Junji Ito, and so there were just like some basic inspirations that we were sort of going back and forth on towards the sort of middle of the writing process. I was like, oh my god, this is almost like The Thing, that point. Right, there's some of those kind of components, and so it was just like,
which was an inspiration for Icewind Dale, the hardcover. That this adventure and the Adventures League adventures were all the setting. That was the setting for all the adventures that were being written for this season.
For reference, it's season 10. If somebody's watching.
if someone's a DDAL nerd like us,
or watching way later, I suppose.
But yeah, Adventures League has a program where the general public, the community, can create content, and you get a template, you get some story prompts to start you out with, but we got to do something a little bit more special. We didn't have to follow those story prompts. We got permission
Oh,
to run with the story that Chris and I came up with.
That's great.
Yeah,
That was
it
another email that when we got that, I was like, oh, okay. It's on that level. All right.
Yeah. Ma'at sent out that email, and I was like, oh, this is where we're doing. Okay, great. I'm totally on board.
Well, and we were nominated for an award, correct?
Yes, yeah. Gen Con does a Ennies award ceremony every year. So Gen Con's coming up. If you're gonna be there.
Yeah.
Also, it's supposed to be online too, but I don't have that information yet. But yeah, I'm gonna be online watching it.
And Fenway, just stream it to us.
I will. I'll stream it. Like, I'll Facebook Live it. Set up a tripod.
Yeah, I was gonna say
actually,
you'll be there, right? So that's
I will.
You'll be able to accept it in person when you all win. No,
Fenway and I actually share any award that we got last year.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's for
Please tell us about it.
Uncaged Volume 2, right, Fenway?
I'm Volume 3.
Volume 3. Uncaged Volume 3 won any award, and it's right up there.
Super
That's
cool.
it right there.
Yeah. I would have mine hanging up if everything in my room wasn't everywhere, because we're moving. So, fun things. But it will be getting hung up in my new room. So.
Yay.
Wow. Well, best of luck to this winning. And because I don't know, wish I knew what day of Gen Con that is. I would say it right here because I don't know. But
I think it's a Friday.
Okay.
I think it's this. If it's the Friday, then it's the 17th. Because I know I'm basing all of my stuff off of. So I leave on Wednesday, which is the 15th, and everything. Past that, I'm like, how many days from Wednesday is it?
Gotcha.
Yeah, if you're gonna be at Gen Con, please say hi to Fenway with your mask and hand sanitizer on.
Yeah, right.
Yes. I will be masked. I will be using so much hand sanitizer.
Okay, the date is the 17th. So Friday, this Friday. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
At 6 p.m. Pacific time, which is me.
Mhm.
What's that in Indiana? In
Indiana, I believe it's Eastern, I think.
8?
I think it's Eastern.
Eastern is 9.
Or 9.
Central is 8.
Yeah.
Mountain time is 7.
So
there we go.
Fenway will know by Friday, but the rest of y'all have plenty of time to figure out, to translate what that timing is. But yeah.
Well, best of luck, seriously. I hope you all win another Ennie. That'd be so awesome. I'm curious if there's like any sort of final thoughts in general about any of this, and then I do want to have you all be able to sort of plug